Welcome back to the channel. First off, some really quick comments about channel stuff in general. Thank you so much for the warm response to the last video. As I said, it was a lot of work, and I'm pretty happy with how it all turned out. Also, something new that I started with that last video is essentially a tip jar system. So rather than doing a Patreon or something like that, I have an account on Ko-fi where you can just, drop a couple bucks. The response there after the last video was shockingly positive, and I mean, you already know who you are, but the few folks who did contribute there, I was shocked in the best way possible. Also, I didn't set this up specifically, but apparently you can do like a Patreon style membership on Ko-fi, and someone elected to do that. You definitely know who you are, and my goodness, like the biggest vote of confidence possible is what that means to me. So apparently that's the thing. If more people want to do that, I can think of some ways to offer some rewards and benefits as per usual. So I'll work on that, but we'll see how it shakes out. For now, it's a tip jar if you feel like being generous. That's all. As for today's video, I've made some pretty strong statements about the overall worthlessness of marketing, and I stand by all of that, but I think that this would also be a good time to make some clarifications. So for one, marketing is not useless in reference to marketing professionals. I mean, it's the basis of this big, giant global industry. So it is doing something. I'm not saying it's worthless in all dimensions or for everyone in the world, but from the perspective of normal, everyday people, meaning, all of us, marketing actually is useless. Some people like to pretend that it helps, folks find the right products that they want or need to buy, but more realistically, it just helps brands find people who can be convinced to buy their stuff. So in terms of the intended purpose of marketing and advertising, no thank you, I'm good without it. But when marketing is removed from the context of its original intended purpose, it absolutely can have value, and that value is the subject of this video. I believe strongly that ads and other forms of marketing should be carefully preserved and made accessible to the public in some form. I understand that this all probably sounds pretty strange coming from me and given the nature of this channel and everything, so I'll do my best to explain, and you can decide whether I was convincing or not. So I think a useful comparison here is the idea of found object in conceptual art. Now, I would describe a found object as when an artist comes across an object somewhere in the world and they decide that it could serve an artistic purpose, that it could communicate something of value, specifically if it's removed from its original environment and placed within the context of a gallery or a museum. Context and environment have an extremely powerful influence on how a work of art is perceived, and seeing, for example, an everyday object in like a fancy contemporary art museum will probably make you view that object differently, even if only temporarily. And while that might sound like a weird approach to take to the subject here, I don't think it's all that different from stripping, say, like a TV commercial of its original context and its original intent to the point that it no longer serves that original purpose. As always, this is open to debate, but here are the three main ways that I think ads can offer value, real value, to regular people's lives. 1, by acting as pure entertainment. 2, by providing risk-free viewing. And 3, serving as a form of historical record. Now let's see if any of these actually hold up under scrutiny. I'm happy to admit that ads, in addition to, being ads, can be entertainment as well. And that's not something that advertisers are offering altruistically. It's just a tactic, get people to pay attention by being entertaining, most often by using humor, and then sear your messaging into the brains of your viewers by the time that the spot is over.
Where's the beef?
You're Wendy's kind of people.
And honestly, I really do appreciate marketing that offers something of practical use. So a pen with the name of a local flower shop printed on it, is still a pen, regardless of whether that marketing function is effective. And I'm sure lots of people who do remember really specific ads like the ads themselves, meaning like their surface level properties, the story being told, completely separate from the brand or the product being advertised. It's the commercial itself that's fun, and I definitely have plenty of those myself. Here's some of them on the screen right now.
If your man used Old Spice instead of lady-scented body washes, he could smell like he took you on more of these while wearing this. But probably this.
Time for a feeding. Ah, jam it.
And in terms of their entertainment value, those commercials are, I think, pretty much on par with like a YouTube comedy sketch video posted 18 years ago. In other words, while they might not be incredible works of art, they still mean something to somebody, and if they disappeared completely, it would be a loss. And I think that, on its own, is enough reason to preserve ads, but it's really just the start. Next up, I think you knew that nostalgia was gonna come into the conversation at some point, so here it is. Media companies tend to paywall access to nostalgic properties. They know that that quality gives those works a really significant amount of value, especially for very specific audiences. But I probably don't need to tell you that ads can be just as viscerally nostalgic as any childhood show or movie. TV commercials in particular, I think, really have that quality, and it's gotta be the repetition. Like if you watched TV as a kid, then you definitely saw the same ads so many times over that your subconscious probably memorized them completely. So for someone around my age, for example, hearing this,
you're on a mission to get Nickelodeon magazine, so don't just stand there.
probably hits pretty hard, even if you haven't thought about it for many years. And I think most people are already aware of the nostalgic power of ads. My evidence being the many commercial compilations on YouTube and their impressive view counts. And some of them are actually really well produced too. Like they have nice intros. They have pretty good transfers of the ads themselves. These kinds of compilations are also like a completely valid form of ad preservation, by the way, which is the whole point of this video. Now, it's a form of preservation that can only exist thanks to the ambivalence of, you know, a major social media platform and then the countless brands and ad agencies responsible for those ads in the first place. But it's also highly effective and highly accessible preservation. And I just like watching these things. I enjoy getting my nostalgic kick from some old commercials. And I even enjoy like the borrowed nostalgia from ads that aired well before my time. And going way back to like the 60s and the 70s, ads have a quaintness going for them too. They feel soft and toothless and even gentle compared to modern day advertising, despite, you know, still having the same motivations and intentions.
髪に優しい7種のハーブティモテ新発売
And beyond nostalgia, I'm sure there are plenty of other ways for folks to wring some kind of entertainment value from ads that I just haven't even thought about yet. But even from my limited perspective and my limited discussion here, I do think there are plenty of reasons to understand and accept how ads could be used as a form of entertainment rather than as a form of marketing. Okay. As a lead into this section, I'm not sure whether anyone is going to side with me on this, but I have a suspicion that exposure to ads is bad for your health, not to mention your financial health. This topic definitely warrants its own video, one where I could look at actual research, but I'll have to let it sit as just biased speculation for now. So from a subjective point of view, I can definitely say that watching, listening to, or just being exposed to ads in really any way is generally a negative experience for me. But what if most of that negativity comes from the contemporary nature of the ads and like their relevance? What if they only feel so awful because they represent an appeal and potentially a threat right now in the present. Well, that would mean that ads that aren't relevant to the present moment are a lot less negative to watch. And for me, I think the proof is in the pudding. Just try it for yourself if you feel like testing this out. Let's just ignore the nostalgia of the old ads for now. Just focus on how you feel while watching a really old commercial.
That shoved the piano, that collapsed the wall, that belonged to the lucky guy who was insured by Continental Insurance.
For me, there's a weird sense of relaxation. Compared to watching a contemporary ad, I don't feel the need to engage or the need to willfully disengage, if that makes sense. I don't feel the need to be supportive or cynical about the brand or the product. I'm free. Like, it can't hurt me. In a best case scenario, that company that's advertising no longer exists. So even if I wanted to give them money, I couldn't. Honestly, it's a rush. But on a nerdier level, risk-free ad viewing is also one of the best ways I think there is to practice your marketing analysis skills. Now, sure, a lot of these specific tactics being used will probably be outdated if we're talking about older ads, but the fundamentals of marketing really haven't changed that much, and I do think that the lack of marketing pressure makes for a great practice environment. Kind of like learning to wrestle in a bounce house before moving up to a real mat, or I guess a wrestling ring, depending on whichever kind of wrestling you pictured in your head when I said that word. And while I generally recommend that people stay away from modern day marketing as much as possible if they can help it, it is the opposite for old, outdated advertising. Just go to town, you know? Watch as much as you can stand. I genuinely think that it's healthier, and not having to worry about whether something you're doing is harming your health is a real gift, one that I appreciate more and more every single year. A little bit of a preamble to this one. Maintaining accurate public conceptions about corporate history is, I think, more complicated than it needs to be. Probably because there are a lot of opposing forces at work. So just think about any of the really famous examples of a well-known company still operating today doing something objectively bad. A lot of revered German companies like Volkswagen, BMW, Hugo Boss, they very deliberately aided the For example, Disney, of course, depicted and perpetuated some really disgusting racial stereotypes, and of course, tobacco companies continued to promote cigarettes and other tobacco products long after they were aware of the likely health outcomes.
If you smoke a lot, I suggest that you take the Kent carton test and just see for yourself what a difference Kents can make. You switch to Kent and smoke one carton. Now, I don't mean just a pack or two, but a carton. You'll find that Kent's Micronite filter gives you high filtration.
More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette.
It's very important and very valuable to remind people that these things happened. But it's also pretty easy to feel annoyed by anyone who keeps bringing them up. And I think that annoyance can then spur defensive, retaliatory reactions from the companies themselves and also just from normal people. In fact, that's kind of just the entire story of the internet, isn't it? Someone has a strong stance on just anything, and the strength of that stance gets people to join the other side just as a pure reaction. Anyway, or people hear all these complaints about, oh, here's the bad stuff these companies did in the past, and they just decide to completely ignore it. Like, yeah, I know they did all this bad stuff once upon a time, but that was a really long time ago, and I still want to buy from them. That's the most important thing. So the whole topic is not going to be solved in this video, but I bring it up because a big part of preservation is maintaining accurate and I think evocative records of how things were and how things actually happened. And where ads are concerned, I think that they can serve as historical record, not by being like, you know, hyper accurate representations of life itself in a particular time period. You know, the housewives of 50s commercials aren't exactly representative of how people in that position acted or felt at the time.
Hey, great coffee.
It's instant Folgers. Doesn't it taste good as fresh perked?
Better.
Better than those girls make at the office?
Honey, their coffee can't hold a candle to yours.
But rather they work as very clear evidence of corporate lies. And I think the reason that blatantly false or misleading ads are so evocative in the context of historical record is that ads, by their nature, are incredibly positive and confident. It's like someone standing in front of, you know, the dolphin exhibit at the aquarium, and they're yelling to everyone within earshot that these are not dolphins, but mermaids. Mermaids who just happen to be wearing elaborate costumes. To any regular person, that's just so obviously, immediately, inherently wrong. To me, ads that show a company or an entire industry getting caught in the act are more valuable than a paragraph in a Wikipedia article that just dryly describes that same company or industry getting caught in the act. It's visual, it's sometimes video if we're talking about a TV commercial, and it shows off hubris in a beautiful way. In short, ads associated with corporate crimes, or something close to it, are fantastic own goals that should never be forgotten. So this is the part of the video where I can talk about what's actually being done. I did my research to see whether ad preservation is currently a thing at all, and to what degree it's actually accessible to the public, because I think that's a massively important part of preservation. Preserving it at all is one thing, but if nobody can access it, what's the point? And a funny thing happened here. It's actually happened before. Initially, I found absolutely nothing. Maybe my Googling was subpar or something, but I wasn't seeing it. I wasn't seeing like advertising museums. I wasn't seeing any specific preservation efforts. So I wrote a whole segment based on that lack of findings, and I shot it. I had it done. I was like, cool, I can just edit the video and put it up. Well, no, long story short, I have to scrap all of that, though I'll still show you the fun little clip here just for kicks. Stayed around to the end. She got a new collar. Oh, I thought you were going to say something. Oh, no. I was wrong. Ad preservation absolutely is happening, and I'm really happy about that. The best overarching resource that I found for this is a page on the Library of Congress website. Anyway, this page has a wonderful breakdown of various organizations, most of them private organizations, but also the Library of Congress itself in terms of its activities for the preservation of TV commercials specifically. Print ads seems to be another topic entirely, but I do admit that TV commercials has been basically my primary focus throughout this whole video, and it's absolutely what I've been picturing when just talking about the concept of ad preservation. So I won't go through all of these. I'll leave the link if you would like to take a look at it yourself, but basically we have a pretty robust span of TV commercial preservation happening in the United States, also abroad, though I think one thing that is important to point out here is that there's a pretty wide gap between just straight kind of hardcore preservation efforts and then collections or libraries that most people can actually access whenever they feel like it. So for example, the Library of Congress's collection is really only supposed to be available on site and specifically to researchers, and you'll find that that's the case for plenty of these collections. They really are just meant to be preserved, period, and you're going to need to get some sort of special clearance if you actually want to view them. On the other hand, there are a number of either organizations, or I guess maybe we should just call them digital libraries, where you can find plenty of TV commercials from almost any time period you can think of, and they're just completely accessible. This website in particular, look at this. This is all just here on the home page. It's super easy to access, and then it seems that you can just dig through for pretty much anything you're looking for. I can't speak to the total number of spots that they've saved, or the comprehensiveness of the collection, but at least as far as I'm concerned, this is basically an ideal. So, to sum up, the call to action for this video was originally going to be, oh no, it's up to us to save the ads, and now it's sort of funny. All of that is swept away. You absolutely still can do some grassroots preservation, DIY, try to keep stuff up on YouTube. We don't really have to do that anymore, at least as far as I see it. And that's really good news. So if anything, the new call to action is to take advantage of these libraries. Look at these collections any way you can, especially the ones that you can get just by having an internet connection. Go through, see what's big in contemporary advertising, go back and look at past decades. You can look through ads for specific industries, of course, and, for all of the reasons I talked about earlier, just as a form of entertainment, a way to get some nostalgia, as a means of historical record. I think it's wonderful to have access to all this stuff, and even the stuff that has much more restricted access, those really hardcore preservation operations. If you are a researcher, if you are a student, you are one of very few people worldwide who have a completely legitimate reason to reach out to these libraries and say, I want to see it. So the thrust of this whole video is still intact. I do still feel that preservation is extremely important, and to be honest, I'm relieved that it's not up to us, the regular people, to actually do the work of preservation. So let's continue to take advantage of these libraries. Let's continue to learn from marketing, especially stuff that, again, doesn't have that immediate impact of it's trying to get you to spend your money today, here and now. Use it, learn from it, become a smarter customer, a more informed customer. And if you happen to be into marketing resistant, going through a bunch of ads can actually help you steel yourself, I think, from the appeals of contemporary advertising. So this project has been a pretty big 180 for me, but in a good way, I think. And thank you so much for joining me for the whole thing. I'll be back as soon as I can. And until then, take care of yourself, and I'll see you later.